friends! Welcome back to another ghastly, slimy, religious episode of the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we take the movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, here for a brief introduction before today's exciting episode. Guys, if you want the movies every day this month, we did the work, damn it. But you got to go help us out. Go to patreon.com/filmalchemistpod. It's the very best way to help the show. It's the very best way to make the show exactly what you want, man. You get votes. You can eventually pick double features. You get commentaries. You get your voice heard. Some miniseries. We should have a Tales from the Crypt miniseries beginning next month. A little side dish for your Thanksgiving month. But neither here nor there, guys. We really appreciate it. For those of you who help us out, thank you so much. You are the lifeblood of this podcast. For those of you who have it in your heart to help us out, we thank you as well. Again, the 2 Patreon exclusives and the 13 Ghost commentary over on Patreon. The exclusives, Train to Busan and The Eyes of the Mother. Really fun stuff, guys. So go over there, patreon.com/filmalchemistpod. The YouTube is Film Alchemist. The email, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. Make sure you're finding us on all the socials you're on. Share the hell out of everything, especially this month, man. Let's bring more of our creeps into this good time fun house, right? Also, if you guys would be so kind, leave those ratings and reviews wherever you find pods. It's the best way to help us defeat the algorithmic religious goo that be oppressing our weekend and ruining our plans. All right. Enough of that, guys. Enough business. We've had enough. Today, we're here to talk about existential dread. We're here to talk about religion and aliens and all the big stuff that the maestro, John Carpenter brought us in the film Prince of Darkness with our new friend, J. Blake Fichera. He was a fucking awesome guy. I'm sure you guys know who he is, right? He runs the Scored to Death podcast. Also wrote 2 books with the same title, right? Scored to Death. You should be like me and make sure you order one from him. I did. I just started it, and I can tell I'm going to love this, right? It's interviews with famous horror movie, wonderful horror movie composers, talking about their craft. And it's just a love letter to not only horror cinema, but a thing that I feel like we miss a lot, how wonderful and important the scores of these iconic films are in our memories. So Jay was so deeply knowledgeable to the point of almost being intimidating, right? But while he is so deeply knowledgeable, he just has a very warm personality about him. So immediately we just got to talking, and although I knew my brain was smaller, he disarmed me with his charm and his warmth. So yeah, I feel like you get a great mix, right? Jay is very insightful. He gives very in-depth analysis and opinions on these films. He knows what the hell he's talking about. And then there's me, who he coddles and walks along like a young babe lost in the woods. Jay was a wonderful guy. He also has a Kickstarter going on right now. You will find the details in the show notes. The episode details, all that. We've also been sharing it to our socials. If you guys would be so kind to go to his Kickstarter, he's trying to make the documentary version of his books, Scored to Death. And who here is going to lie to my face, lie to my ears? It's an audio medium. Maybe YouTube if you're there. Who's going to lie to this fucking face and tell me it wouldn't be the greatest day of your life to wake up on your day off, click on the old Shudder, Amazon, Tubi, whoever the hell pays him the most, and just see, I'm going to sit here and watch a long documentary about the classic scores of horror films. You know you want it, so help Jay make this movie for us. All right, enough business. Without further ado, let's listen to the episode Prince of Darkness with our friend J. Blake Fichera, a fucking wonderful guy who you need to go support. All right, guys, welcome. I would like for you to take a second, if you would be so kind, introduce yourself to the people and what movie you picked tonight.
My name is J. Blake Fichera, and we chose it kind of together.
Yes, a meeting of the minds.
Prince of Darkness by
Hell yeah.
John Carpenter. I'm the author of 2 books, Scored to Death, Conversations with Some of Horror's Greatest Composers, which features interviews with 14 composers who have made significant contributions to the horror genre, including John Carpenter and Alan Howarth, who
Hell yeah.
scored today's movie. And then my second book, Scored to Death 2, More Conversations with Some of Horror's Greatest Composers, is 16 more interviews with amazing composers who have made contributions to the horror genre. And if anybody is interested, I'm in the process of trying to make those books into a documentary. And if you happen to be listening to this during October of 2022, there should be a Kickstarter campaign running now to help raise money to turn those books into the definitive documentary about horror film music. And if you missed the Kickstarter, you can always follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Scored to Death, or join the mailing list at scoredtodeath.com, and you'll have information about the movie and all that jazz.
Just stuff cash in envelopes and shoot it right. No, I think for our crowd, that'll be a really big popular thing. So you guys should donate to that. We certainly will be. So Prince of Darkness is probably the great John Carpenter movie that we have not covered yet. We actually did a whole John Carpenter month. And I don't know why, but it feels like with this movie, Prince of Darkness, it just kind of falls through the cracks sometimes in the Carpenter oeuvre, right? I don't know how we missed it, but I was really glad when you decided that this would be one of your options, man. So I jumped on it, of course. What is it about Prince of Darkness that you love so much, and why do you think that it's this movie that tends to get somewhat forgotten amongst John Carpenter's other works?
Well, John Carpenter is my favorite filmmaker, so there aren't many John Carpenter movies that I don't, at the very least, hold in high regard.
Right.
This movie, I saw in, I'm going to say, the early 90s. A good friend of mine at the time, I was in high school, and my buddy Pete and I got into a thing where we would rent a horror movie every Friday.
Hell yeah, dude.
And we rented this, and I remember sitting in his tiny bedroom in Clifton Park, New York, and we watched Prince of Darkness, and it just kind of made a huge impact on me. A year or two later, I rented for a sleepover, and I also, which is one of the main inspirations for Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers, which is a podcast I've done for many years. John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, and that movie absolutely changed my life. I would not have written the books, the Scored to Death books, if it wasn't for that score.
Hell yeah,
that movie just kind of like blew my mind, and the soundtrack did. And, you know, in typical fashion, I think for most fanatics or collectors and people that kind of geek out about stuff, once you find something you like, then you kind of research it. And this is pre the internet, so it wasn't super easy to
remember the days.
Jump online and find, but through research I discovered that this guy directed Prince of Darkness, and he directed The Thing, and he directed They Live and Big Trouble in Little China. And I was like, Escape from New York, of course, and even Starman I had seen, and Christine I have a very it's a specific memory about seeing that very, very young. And it was like, man, this guy has been such a huge influence in my entire life, and I didn't even know it.
Yep.
And so that just started a huge kind of like passion and love for John Carpenter movies, which I still have today. Prince of Darkness specifically, I love because I think in a lot of ways it may not be totally successful, but I think it's maybe his most ambitious movie. And I have a theory that it may also be his most personal movie.
Yeah, dude. Weirdly, I thought that same thing. I'm interested to hear. Yeah, I thought the same thing, man, because I've always loved Carpenter. I got a massive concussion when I was like 4 years old, because we were doing some country shit, right? Like my mom had this huge dog, and or my grandmother, right? Little old lady, ran away, and my dad, like, I don't remember how the fuck this happened. I know the listeners have heard this, and they're probably like, we get it, you were traumatized. but we were driving alongside a country road, and my dad's driving, and we're just and the dog's running beside the car. I don't know how fast that is, 10 miles an hour, whatever. My dad's idea was he flicks the door open, he holds me by my underwear, and he's like, reach out, grab the dog, and pull him in, right? And this is a fucking massive, like, German Shepherd, whatever dog. Pulls me out of the car, obviously, as soon as I grab him. I bounce down the gravel road. And so to try to pay me off from fucking telling my mom, his ex-wife, what had happened, because they were going in and out of court and shit, he went out and let me pick anything I want. And I picked Gremlins and Big Trouble Little China. And I said that weekend, when I was maybe like 5 years old, totally changed the entire trajectory of the rest of my life. Almost everything I love in movies comes from those two, but particularly Big Trouble Little China. So when I was in high school and we would do the same shit you would do, we would always go, and Friday night, as soon as we got out of school, we'd go to the store, and we'd all try to rent whatever we thought would be the most fucked up movie, right? To freak everyone out as we tried to then like pregame for the weekend, whatever. When I found out the guy that did Big Trouble Little China did Halloween, it fucking melted my brain. Because those movies feel so diametrically opposed on first viewing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was my long-winded version for I also love John Carpenter. What I think about Prince of Darkness, though, is what I really appreciate about this one is I feel like there's I don't know what the phrase is, right? Like John Carpenter's really putting his giant balls on the table. And it's just saying, I don't care if you think this is taking too long to get where it's going. He really makes us sit in this concept of what happens if you're just like at school on Friday with these other 55-year-old students. And you're like, oh shit, the devil's in the basement. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? And the amount he makes us just sit in that without losing tension, I found stunning today.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I love the fact that the opening credit sequence is like almost 11 minutes long. And I love the music in that. And I love the pacing of it. It's, it's something, I don't know. I don't know if it's an age thing or it's just just movies don't do that anymore. Movies didn't really do that then. So, but Carpenter is he's an old soul, especially when it comes to filmmaking. Like he is a classic Hollywood filmmaker, but in the late 70s and 80s and into the 90s. And he's working in a convention in a system that is kind of evolved past him or devolved past him, depending on what your point of view is. The reason why I think this is kind of an oddly personal film for him is that when you look at his filmography, with the exception of something like Escape from New York, which clearly was just his, wanted to make, a futuristic Western and maybe The Fog. But most of his movies were he wrote them for hire. Like Halloween was not. He didn't make Halloween because he wanted to make Halloween. He made Halloween because, he was,
He's like, I'm deeply passionate about babysitter murders.
Well, Blands came to him and said, this is what I want. And so he wrote that with Deborah Hill. But 1987 comes around and he's completely disillusioned with working in Hollywood, working for Hollywood studios. The Thing was a major debacle. I mean, I imagine, just think about, and I'm sure you discussed this when you did The Thing, but just imagine making The Thing, watching it, and being in the cutting room, and then having that almost end your career. I mean, that would, like a less strong guy or person would,
oh my God,
would leave the business.
Yeah,
completely.
The fact that movie was a bomb still to this day baffles me, because that's one of those maybe like handful 10 movies I've seen in my life where I'll always remember the first time I saw that movie. That movie really got me. But he had he exploded with Halloween, obviously, and then he had been on this series of not good box office returns by this point, right? Because I know Big Trouble in Little China also didn't do as expected. And then The Thing. And so there is this, because I didn't realize that this was something he independently financed. That was something I just discovered today. And you kind of feel that energy in this movie, strangely enough, right? And that, I think that might be one of those things where you can feel it just a little bit outside of the group of the other movies. Is it just has that real kind of low budget, we got to get the job done mentality, which I've actually come to endear. It's come to endear me to the movie more and more as I get older.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, that was kind of where I was going with, which is, he decides after Big Trouble in Little China doesn't well, he decides like, I don't want to play that game anymore. I want to go back to making low budget films the way I did a couple of years ago at the beginning of my career, where I have total creative control. I want to make a movie where I can write and choose the script. I can write the characters. Nobody's going to tell me. And this is the movie he decides to make. And I think like for that reason alone, there obviously has to be some kind of like weird connection to it, as opposed to these other movies that he did for hire. And of course, like his stamp is all over all those movies, like he's a auteur in like the purest sense. But when he gets a chance to like, like screw Too Many Cooks in the Kitchen, I don't care if I can make a bigger movie. I want to make what I want to make. And this is the movie he chooses to make, because the summer before he writes it, he's reading some book on quantum mechanics.
Right.
And it like alters his perception of like reality and how he thinks like life is. And he wants to make a movie about it. And we see not just like all these like Carpenterisms that we can get into later, but we see how he, especially now, I think it's easy for us to recognize, because there's such a huge period of nostalgia for the 80s, which has gone on way longer than I think anybody would expect it. I mean, we should have been into nostalgia for the 90s by now.
Almost ad nauseum, some would say.
But like, that period, that generation of filmmakers were nostalgic. I mean, that's why like Romero made Creepshow and John Carpenter made The Thing. Like they were looking back at the 50s and their childhood and saying like, I want to pay homage to that. That's why like Happy Days existed and Grease got made,
right.
and all these things. But, with Carpenter, I've talked to Cody Carpenter's son a few times on Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers, and I've gotten to know Cody a little bit. But one of the times I had him on Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers, I gave him like a quiz about his dad, because I was like, here's my like.
Right.
Like here's my perception of what John Carpenter is, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. And it was like, what kind of car does he drive? I imagine he drives a Mustang. He's like, no, he drives a Cadillac. And I was like, okay, like
close enough.
Is he into the Beatles or the Beach Boys? Because I imagine he's into the Beach Boys. He's like, well, he loves the Beatles, but he also loves the Beach Boys. But one of the things I asked him, I said, like, what's like the guilty pleasure movie in the Carpenter household? Like when it's on, John Carpenter has to watch it.
Right.
And he said Independence Day. But
that tracks.
But also, and I think it makes sense when you hear the other thing, which is like anything that's like 50s sci-fi.
Oh yeah, for certain.
And certainly like Independence Day is definitely, just like a 90s version of that. and so, clearly it's, I think even more than horror, I think his real like passion, nostalgia lies in the science fiction of like his youth. And, there's a movie that he's been wanting to make forever based on a book called like The Stars, My Destination, like science fiction. Is really where his passion is. And so I think when we get to Prince of Darkness, like, we have, of course, like this recent fascination that he has with quantum mechanics, but he writes something that pays homage to Nigel Neal, who is a writer who wrote the Quatermass movies, or the books, and the Quatermass movies that he clearly loved. And he had hired Nigel Neal to write Halloween 3, even though it didn't end up working out. And he quotes another influence was a book called Timescape by Gregory Benford. So we see like him getting to like fit into that horror mold that he's become known for and that he's comfortable with, but starting to explore like real science fiction in like a
Yeah.
very heady way. And
Yeah.
I think kind of for like those reasons, like I just like I think it's a really unique movie in his catalog, and I think one that I just feel like it was made for reasons that, you know, like we may never know.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, creative control is the most elusive devil in Hollywood. Maybe he just wanted to pin it down. Who knows? No, I mean, there is because I think this movie, right? You can kind of see the children of this movie came out years ago, right? Like I remember when I saw Primer, I was like, this feels like a very stripped down Prince of Darkness, right? They just took out that horror element. And what I really like about this movie is I think John Carpenter knew where his bread was buttered, right? He knew at that point horror movies were his avenue to the biggest audience. But he clearly wanted to make this science fiction movie. And I love these kind of talks they're having at the start, right? Because we're jumping back and forth between a church and a college campus on some kind of, physics lecture. And he talks about how everything is ordered and logical until you go down small enough. And at the subatomic level, everything we think we know gets annihilated, right? And it's just pure chaos and insanity. And I thought that was such a clever way to frame this, right? Is that science can know so much to a point, and then anything beyond that is pure chaos. And what if, Jesus and God and Satan were these aliens that came in long ago, and there's a myriad, and he just starts adding in these layers of sci-fi that I'm kind of with you. I don't know if it all adds up perfectly.
Yeah.
But I think he gives it this great armor of there's always this unknown. And the fact that we as an audience have to sit back and just accept that there could be no rhyme or reason, or it's just something beyond our kind of basic grasp of what's happening. And it kind of disarms your brain. Even in a movie that's as heady as this, I felt like most of it, he's just saying, like, it's okay. It's okay, man. They're just squirt gunning each other and mirrors and whatever, dude. Just enjoy it. And so I really felt kind of safe, right? It felt like I was being held by my mom watching this movie, if that makes any sense. It's just like a little safe space.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're talking about is, one of the reasons why one of the many reasons why I kind of love this movie, because in a way, it's his scariest movie. Like, what's more frightening
yes.
than that? You know what I mean? Like, when we talk about horror movies, and you really start to analyze them. One thing that when I got really into horror movies and kind of studying them and stuff, and when I was in film school and college and stuff, one of the things that I really found fascinating about them was to just, like there are fears, and some of them are personal fears and some of them are universal fears. And, every horror movie is kind of trying to exploit those fears. And what are they? And it's, of course, it's like, fear of the unknown, fear of the darkness, fear of this, all these things, fear of loss of identity is a huge one that I love. And that's like and everything from Invasion of the Body Snatchers to The Thing to this one, even to Night of the Living Dead, and this movie is in some ways, like the ultimate horror movie. I mean, we're dealing with Satan. We're dealing with, but the thing is, it's taking this very unique and odd viewpoint of it. But we are talking about the devil and possession. We even have like the mark of the beast on on the woman who bumps around.
A virgin birth. Yeah, we've got a little everything.
Outside of the place, we have zombies. It's very much a siege movie in the context of a John Carpenter. We have that fear of loss of identity I was talking about, and I think we see that best with the character of Calder, the black guy, who is clearly like losing himself and is distraught over it. Like somehow he's having a hard time with it, as opposed to just going all the way over. We have
there's so many anxieties, right? Like even the homeless people representing this kind of left behind by society, right? A little they live. I love the shot when Alice Cooper and the homeless people are watching as Donald Pleasance, the priest, rolls up in a limo. And I was like, what a fucking brilliant. Like, that's just a perfect 1 second of a movie. You're like, I get all this already. But no, Calder is specifically in this movie, I think is kind of the low-key MVP of the movie, right? Because one, he's the first person who's kind of like Does no one else see how fucking enormous this is, right? He's the first guy that, like, this is fucking insanity, right? A guy who perhaps has had to work his way into this system a little more than everyone else in the cast. Yeah. And he's sitting there like, guys, this is fucking huge. This is paradigm changing. But the scene with him that fucked me up is when he's taken over, right? Because we see the other kind of Satan zombies maliciously running around and super soaking people, right? He's carrying a chair and coming up the stairs screaming or singing Amazing Grace, kind of screaming too. Amazing Grace, and he's so fucking sweaty, and he has this beautiful face where there's just like this manic, it looks like the skin of his face is going to peel back, right? And he can't take it anymore, what's happening, right? And he tries to end it. He tries to, cut his own throat, right? The most fucked up part is not more than 10 minutes later in the movie, he fucking comes back. And he's got that same fucking giggle, but like with hurt eyes. And so it's like this guy, it's kind of like that's, one of these theories I've always had is that It's a Wonderful Life is also the most scary movie, right? Because that's a guy who's just like, damn, I can't cut it anymore. And God's like, more. Like, you got to do more. And I'm going to make it worse. You know what I mean? Like, you can't even just get peace and quiet. This guy got fucking brought back to serve this alien ooze whatever. And it's just, there's so many of those brilliant. I mean, I think you're right. Like, this really hits any kind of fear you could imagine. It exists in this movie, and I just.
Well, even I think what I was leading up to is like, and even the ones like you can't, like, of course, there's like the body horror and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, like, it's about like how man is small in the context of the cosmos. Like, he's so comparing us to insects a lot of the time in this movie.
That's why I had to quit getting stoned and watching Cosmos, dude. It was like fucking with my head too much.
And it's like, it's like man is existing, but without logic and understanding of it, like, at all. And and in that way, it's like that, it's kind of the scariest thing he could come up with.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, the high level physicist just being reduced to nothing. The thing that really fucked with me in this one is, and I don't have per se a love affair with the church, but watching Donald Pleasance have his total existential crisis, because that was kind of the other thing I cherish about this movie, is that it's possibly in Donald Pleasance's entire career his kind of smallest performance, not in terms of quality, but in terms of unleashing his kind of more Donald Pleasance traits, right? He's really small and quiet and introspective in this. This is a man, he's kind of the anti-Loomis, right? He's Father Loomis, not Dr. Loomis, because Dr. Loomis is out there like, evil, evil. He's screaming and fucking shooting guns, running around all over the place, right? This Father Loomis is just sitting there like, holy shit, man. Everything I gave my entire fucking life to, I'm an old man at the very end of my road. This might all be gone. And to me, the scene of the movie, right? Because he's kind of sitting there debating about the, where physics ends and religion could start. And how the evil's just out here and it's influencing everything. That scene when, the zombies start fucking really pressing him and he's just like, fuck y'all. And he runs into that room and closes the door. No longer charitable. And he's just sitting there and he's trying to reread some scripture, right? And he just goes, where are you, Christ? Where are you? And it's just this moment of total collapse of this mind.
Yeah.
And it is strange because I think there's so many things in our society that we wish it's like, change it. If I had the pen, I'd change it all tomorrow. And you're like, I don't think we comprehend how much these things are so woven into how we exist. That just ripping that out, right? That Jesus was an alien. Like, that would fucking, like, just imagine trying to, like, do anything the next day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know. I think that's fucking terrifying to me. Even though I don't believe in Jesus, which is strange. You know what I mean?
Well, the Jesus is an alien thing. That wasn't a totally new concept. Larry Cohen had done that, and God told me to, and I'm sure.
Right. That's a good point.
Going back to Chariots of the Gods or whatever, or ancient alien stuff. I'm sure that was.
I'm a big ancient alien guy, but yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where he gets like the influence of like the Quatermass stuff, because the Quatermass was like this rocket scientist who kind of investigates these paranormal and extraterrestrial things. And with Quatermass in the Pit, and I don't want to get too far into it because we're not talking about that movie today, but at its core, like what that movie's doing is um like saying that like Martians came, they couldn't survive on their planet. They came and they kind of altered like prehistoric man, Neanderthals, to be able to house like their consciousness, and
Nice.
that's what like that's why there's people that are violent, and those those are the descendants of these Martians. And but the Martians are like these insects, and the way they look is like this, is like silhouetted. They look like the devil. So there's this part of like,
Uh,
oh, this is where the mythology of Satan came from. And so Carpenter's kind of playing with that of like, okay, like what if science was, what if we were going to try to explain
yeah.
Catholicism and religion, but through scientific terms. And if it was
Yeah.
mythology, I don't want to get in trouble, but if we looked at it as if it were mythology,
I'll fucking say it, man. No. You can come
uh,
after me, man. I come from a Middle Eastern background. We're used to these kind of strikes. No,
you know,
there's that great book. God damn it. I'm going to forget what it's called. It's Children of something, right? Children of whatever, right? But it's this story about this ship comes over like Nebraska, right? In the middle of America. And the voice of the ship is called Corellan, and it's talking to the people, right? It's like this one farmer gets picked as the emissary to mankind. And he's kind of helping out, right? Solving world problems. Like, oh, this Corellan's a pretty good guy. He finally lets him in the ship, and he looks exactly like Tim Curry from Legend, right? Like he looks exactly like our most cartoonish version of Satan. And he talks about that, this traveling throughout the, cosmos and this and that. And watching these people look at this alien being that gave them all of these good things, but then they're like, ooh. Like something deep inside of them is like, but I hate that because it
yeah.
doesn't look like me. And I actually want to pick your brain. What do you make of the choice in this movie to just have it be the spiraling, 1990s Double Dare gack? You know what I mean? Instead of some kind of creature, they would have more of a physical presence in the movie. What'd you make of this choice in the film?
I mean, I kind of love it, and it wasn't.
I agree.
And it's not something I really thought about. I mean, the thought about it being this green ooze, I've obviously thought about, but there was a line here that I sure I've heard and thought about before, but something I totally forgot. Where it's like it's a womb, like he's like it's primordial ooze, and something is something is growing inside there.
Yeah, it's ordering itself. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that was like, oh, like it is. I mean, obviously, it's something isn't birthed out of the tube, but this
Yeah.
idea of fluid and that it is like it's something is being birthed, and that's it's messy business births,
Yeah. Yeah, it
and,
certainly is.
and I think it's. I mean, I think it's a brave choice, but I also
Yeah.
think it's. But at the same time, it's kind of like a safe choice because, like, anything you do
Mm,
is not going to live up to
no.
expectation if you were going to try to personify it in some way.
Yeah.
So to just say that it's like this spinning jar of ooze, it's kind of like safe, but it's also dangerous. It's a
Yeah.
gamble as to what.
Yeah.
And I think not to go on a side tangent, but I think one of the reasons why you mentioned one of your questions was like, why is it often kind of not counted in his filmography? Is that the truth is like not everybody likes it,
Yeah. I feel you.
and I think that has something to do with it. I think at this point, a couple of years ago at Saturday Movie Sleepovers, we did the movie Christine, and I had said at that point that I think that was like the last underrated John Carpenter movie, but I don't think that's the case anymore. He's like bigger now than ever. Like
Yeah.
somehow, like the internet and vinyl releases and like it has been very kind to his
Oh yeah.
legacy. And so like I don't think there's really any of his movies that are still like underrated. Like they're all kind of beloved by the
Yeah.
people that would love them.
Ghost of
But
Mars, maybe. Maybe that's the last holdout.
and maybe someday there will be the
I think we
appreciation
all
that movie
imagine Snake
deserves.
Plissken in it, and we're like, perfect, good enough. I still
But the
even like
truth,
that movie, to be honest.
when I was in film school back in the late '90s, and I was in love with John, and I was obsessed with John Carpenter movies. Like most of his movies were still not beloved. You know, like
Yeah.
people didn't like The Fog then, and
Oh,
you know, and
madness.
people love Big Trouble in Little China, but They Live was loved, but for maybe the wrong reasons.
Hmm.
And you know, and this was definitely unlike the Fog category, which is like you either like it or you don't. And there was a
Yeah.
lot of people that don't like it. I think now more people have come around to it, but I think there are still people who may not be like the huge horror buffs, but are the film buffs who also enjoy John Carpenter who don't like this movie. And I don't know if it's a
Yeah.
matter of that they don't get it. I think it's just that some movies speak to us and some movies don't. And
Yeah.
I think part of that is like it's green ooze in a jar. And some people
Hey, it worked for the turtles, goddammit.
it's secret that's my sequel. Prince of Darkness 2 Secret of the Ooze.
What if instead of being that open-faced woman, she would have become Super Shredder? That would have been a box office bonanza. No, I mean,
we see the goo leak into the sewers, and then
dude,
Splinter comes
crossover
along.
universe, it's the Krang is the dark god. There you go. No, I think to your point though, there is a higher threshold to kind of partake in this movie than other John Carpenter movies, right? I feel like his movies are pretty fucking lean flicks, right? They're just straight at the point. You get it right away. You're pretty much in, right? Maybe not something like Dark Star, right? Some of his, other stuff. But for the most part, right? It's Assault on Precinct 13. It's Halloween. Even The Thing, The Fog, right? Ghost in the Fog. Got it. This one is very esoteric, but in ways that it's not even generous enough to reveal to the audience, right? And I think a lot of people who come to horror really young, right? I think a lot of us find it young. Like mine was, my dad showed me Pumpkinhead too young and I was hooked. And whatever your movie is, that's still my movie I like reach back for all the time. And I think this is not a young person's horror film, right? No. Like if you're like, even the college kids in this movie had to be played by 40-year-olds, right? Like there's just something, if you haven't had enough experience, like you don't have time to worry about the kind of greater societal tears that are about to happen, right? Who cares about religion? Who cares about science? Who cares about homeless people? Whatever, right? You're just like, I understand Michael Myers coming to get me when I'm trying to bang. I don't want to die a virgin. I understand that fear very deeply. But I think there is just a threshold that you have to be willing to run with this movie. And I think that gets a lot easier when you're at our age,
Yeah.
So maybe there is this thing that people will grow into it more, hopefully.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's part of, John Carpenter, the rebel or the nonconformist, like I think it was a very, it was a very conscious decision to say like, look, by 1987, by this time we have Nightmare on Elm Street. We have, how many Jasons by that point, we were still very much in the hold of slasher horror at that point. Yeah. And we were having all these Stephen King movies kind of like were getting dished out by De Laurentiis and everybody. And I think that was part of it. I think Carpenter's like this, I want to make a horror movie that is the anti-80s horror movie.
Yeah.
That is
like a throwback to The Omen, right? Just this kind of quiet, like big picture horror movie.
Yeah, like something that's more like that. I mean, I think part of it's unfortunate that he's dealing with such a small budget. I think the things that don't work about it are probably budgetary.
Yeah.
I know people complain about some of the cast, and
I think it's like love the cast.
Yeah, it's never bothered
part of the movie. Yeah,
it's never bothered me, but I've heard people complain about Jameson Parker in it.
Yeah,
but
okay,
Simon,
so maybe that one. Maybe I'm with that one. I was like, all right, mustache, bring it down a notch.
He was riding high on Simon and Simon at the time.
Yeah,
but but I think like it's like his. I don't know. In some ways, it's his ugliest looking movie. Like it.
But there's still those moments, right? Like the moon silhouetting the cross, right? There's still those moments, right, where you kind of like it.
but the makeups are like the
Yeah.
end makeup is very crude. I mean, it's disgusting, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have like the artistry and the
Very
beauty.
Pizza the Hut. Yeah.
It's not Botine stuff for the Thing, that's for
No.
sure. You know?
Certainly. Little step down. Heaven and hell, as they say.
And I think, with a bigger budget, I think he would have, swung for the fences a little bit more, even like conceptually, probably. Like it would have been bigger than just resulting in like a zombie siege movie at the end. I think like had he known he had the money to spend, he probably would have went for something bigger than what ultimately it ends up being at the end, which is just like Assault on Precinct 13 or Night of the Living Dead, but like in this old church, which is fine. It's
fine. I think that's the exact right word. Fine. But like the whole movie, you really sat here and like, we're pondering, right? Victor Wong and Donald Pleasance are just sitting there like hammering shots and like, what if? And I'm like, that's the movie. And then, crawling between rooms while someone's chewing on your ankle. You're like, that's fine.
Should have just been my dinner with Andre, but with like those two.
Yeah. My dinner with anti-gods. Yeah.
Sitting in the office talking
honestly,
for 2 hours.
That's the movie. And then it ends with the Turtles crossover. We're talking franchise. No, I'll tell you what, though, that the lack of budget sometimes helps out a lot, right?
Sure.
I actually think that finale with the anti-god in the mirror, because it took me a minute to process again. I'm like, wait a sec. So our God lives over there? No, wait, that's the other God, and that's the father of this thing. Okay, I'm with it, right? When they pull the hand out, it's that Satan claw. That was fine, right? Seeing the hand reach into the void. It's exactly like the poster for The Void. It's just that shot on the poster, right? Nice homage. That scene at the end, though, when our lead actress, right, she tackles Lisa Blunt, right? She tackles the satanic, embodiment through the portal, and Donald Pleasance fucking whips the axe and breaks it, right? That last shot is the most haunting shot in the movie. Her just kind of in this like aquatic darkness with these flashes of lights as we see her being pulled off screen.
Yeah.
That was just fucking amazing.
Yeah, that should be the poster, really.
That's the shot of the movie, man, right?
Yeah.
And then
like her reaching for salvation, but not being able
and then
to
the priest is like, fuck you! Right? And fucking breaks the mirror. Donald Pleasance is not a good emissary for the church. And then on the stretcher, he's just like, I did it. I fucking did it all myself. I did a great job. No, but I thought that was terrifying. And then the movie leaves you with this little tag of Jameson Parker sitting there, and he wakes up afraid, right, that she's the one now coming through the window. But he just has that moment where he stops and looks at the fucking mirror. Yeah. And he's just fucking frozen in terror as he reaches out for the glass. And I was like, that's one of those, they set that up so good that little moment that cost you essentially nothing becomes a terrifying thing to walk out of that theater and have to ponder for the rest of the time. One of the things I did want to ask you before we keep jumping around too much, what did you make of the tape from the other side? This kind of message, who sent it, what it was. Because at the end, we see that the girlfriend is now walking out of or Lisa Blunt, not the girlfriend technically.
Yeah.
She did hook up with Mustache a little too easy, I gotta say. He went from, I'm a sexist and proud of it, to let's have coffee, to they wake up in bed together. That was too fast. Neither here nor there. What do you make of this tape? I actually thought it was a pretty cool addition to the movie, the kind of shared dream transmission.
Yeah, well, it's, this is the thing that he borrows from the book Timescape, which is this idea of, in Timescape, it's like scientists of like the late 90s trying to send a message back to the scientists of the 60s say like, you guys got to get your shit together. Because if you don't, we're going to be where we are now.
We're going to be in the goddamn 90s. They're sending them transmissions from Woodstock 99 and shit. This is what happened.
But, I mean, I think it's an awesome device. And
yeah,
I think it's like, unfortunately for this movie, I think it needs more introspection than I think most people want to give it to really kind of appreciate everything that's going on in it.
Yeah.
Because, the ending is like very John Carpenter. Like John Carpenter. This movie has a lot of that. A lot of John Carpenterisms, as I said earlier. You know, it's got the siege. It's got the group of professionals working together. It's got like the supernatural and extraterrestrial body snatching thing. Most importantly, which I think is most fascinating about it, is has this idea of like dormant evil from like the past, which we see, you know, even Michael Myers.
Yeah.
15 years later, the fog, it's the people on the boat, the thing is trapped, you know, frozen in ice. Even Christine is like, you know, from the past. In the Mouth of Madness is like the things that are inside the, you know, on the other side.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea of like this thing dormant. And then there's just so many questions that arise in this movie. And there's no like totally satisfying answers.
Right.
Like, is it the supernova? The rays of the supernova are that the supernova happened before early Earth.
Yeah.
So, and now the rays of the supernova are just now reaching Earth. So, is that what's triggering it?
Yeah.
You know,
who's influencing who? Yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to the broadcast, the dream, and the ending, you know, the uncertain ending is totally a John Carpenter trademark, you know. And I think in this case, it's so uncertain. You know, like it's so you can view it so many ways. I think it took till this viewing and to be an adult, as you were saying, like this movie, you kind of have to grow into it to really like be like, okay, the dream it's a cool device. But then when you really think about it, like, okay, what is it? And I think the big question is who is sending it? Because I think we automatically assume it's a warning, but we don't know that.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's the dream that puts them into action to make it happen. Like,
yeah. Well, that's
like
what I mean. We can't, you don't say don't press the red button because then that's all you fucking think about is pressing the red button.
You know, we do know that by year 1999, the Brotherhood of Sleep doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Because the last one just died.
Yeah.
At the beginning of this movie. So who's sending it? Like like, is it people who want to stop it, or is it people who want it to happen? We don't know. And I think that's really interesting. And the idea of it is great. The execution of it is great. The choice of words, you know, that are said are great. They're so cryptic. And then in the end, we don't know, is it the dream? Is it another transmission? Is it just a dream? And it's just like his weird guilt over this happening.
Yeah.
And if it is a transmission, what does it mean? Yeah. Like, did we stop it and now she comes out and she's actually not threatening? Or is she now the anti-god?
Yeah, she wants to make someone come back and be like, oh, there's a beautiful lady in the church. I'll go check that out. No. I don't know, man. I love what they said, though, right? Because your theory on dormant evil is beautifully fits in this movie, right? Because they talk about how this thing has been, the corrosion dates back 7 million years, right? Way predating any religions we had, this and that. And we talk about, at the end of the movie, right, we juxtapose that to, we've won today, but he's still waiting on the other side of that mirror. So perhaps this is just, you know, Mustache taking it back to his real life and just having to live with the weight of, because we also don't know how the fuck they explain like 20 dead college kids, right? Like, what is going to happen? The homeless were going crazy, I swear to God. You know, but just that, like, right? He has to go back to where, like, the homeless just go back to being homeless. The priest just goes back to spouting his nonsense, like he said earlier in the movie, right? They keep going back to studying equations, and they know they'll never get far enough. And he just lost this girl, right? Could he have done more? Could he have done... So he has to go back, and I think the dormant evil is going to be this... For him, it's just the whole world, right? He just looks out, and everything he sees is just this stagnation, right? And that just every fucking turn in this movie, there's something that's waiting to become a threat, right? So how the fuck does this guy go back to just being a physicist trying to get laid after coffees. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how you maintain course. And so the idea that, because that's the other thing they talk about, right? Donald Pleasance has that wonderful monologue, which he always does, when he talks about, we put ourselves at the center of this alien story because that's what we do. And we put the evil inside of the heart of every man because that puts us at the center of the story, right? Well, if you watch the movie, that becomes a really fun visual journey we go on as all the people get the evil fucking squirted into the center of them and then become a part of it, right? So this whole movie, every single element that you break apart is just, evil is just sitting there waiting. And like water, it just flows to the nearest fucking open crevasse. I don't know, man. I love the looming evil theory. It's pretty, it's pretty spot on.
It's yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, it's terrifying. Like
fucking terrifying, dude.
Yeah, like you're right. Like not just, Brian or whatever his name, Mustache, but like how does the professor, and how do they all go on? Like
the only one who seems like he's gonna love life is Father Loomis. Feels like he's gonna fucking love it. I don't even know if that's his name. That's what it was on the subtitles of my movie. That might have just been a snarky employee. I think it just says priest online. But
yeah.
I think he's going to be ecstatic. He's like, faith totally 100% renewed. I think everyone else is going to be pretty seriously fucked up. Was it just the two? No, three of them. Three of them make it.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's terrifying. Like to just live the rest of your life knowing. It's one thing to have lost this woman that I don't know.
He knew for a long weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, like obviously infatuation, and who knows where it could have gone. But to have lost somebody who sacrificed themselves, but just to like live life knowing like, I want to tell everybody, but one, nobody's going to believe me. Two, if they do, like, what's it going to mean? It's interesting when they're reading the transcription and they're like, and Jesus was of extraterrestrial origin and he came to warn everybody, but he had too much of a following. Like he was, and they decided like it was like that he had too much influence, but it's like, like we know our version of, Christ, but in the context of the movie, like who's they? And
Jesus could be sending the transmissions from wherever the fuck you went. We don't know. That could be like Jesus' second coming, right? We've got a lot of biblical allegory in this movie already.
And it's like,
that's it.
because he's clearly, he's trying to save everybody, but they don't like it. And I love like it's like, so his, like the disciples or whatever decide like, okay, well, we're going to hide this shit until science is advanced enough to explain it to everybody.
We were just some dudes riding around with them. This is fucking crazy.
We're going to take this we're going to build the church in the new world in the 1500s.
Yeah.
And in the middle of what's going to be downtown LA.
Right.
And hide this thing.
Yeah. They're like on the canoe with Lewis and Clark. Don't mind the giant glowing tube. We got to get out west. Let's go. No, because that thing has been there for years, right?
Yeah. Well, they're like, Loomis is like, it was built in the 1500s to blah, blah, blah. But just like the idea of, all this stuff in the transcription I find fascinating because there's also like the anti-God, he put his son in the thing. Mm-hmm. And the only way to open it is because it's locked from the inside. So he put it in there for a later date.
Yeah, right. When he's good and cooked and ready, he'll come out.
Yeah, like I don't. Does the anti-God then go and destroy the supernova? And it's like when that shit hits that planet, then we're good to go. Like buns are coming out of the oven once that happens.
God's working mysterious ways, I guess. But you know what? Honestly, it's weird because if this movie came out today, right? If they remade it, there is not a doubt in my mind that about 50 minutes into the movie, we would get a 6-minute point by point explanation of everything we've seen and exactly what it means and what they need to do to stop it. I fucking cherish messiness in movies at this age, right? I love the fact that these are learned scientists and they're like, we don't fucking know. So why the fuck should you know, right? Like, we're all just kind of taking guesses, right? We're all stabbing, right? Everything he says, maybe it's tachyons, maybe it's this, that. No one fucking knows anything. And I feel like at those really big moments in time, that's what it would always feel like for all of us, right? Like the people who saw World War I, they're like, what the fuck? This makes no sense. The first time you saw a nuclear bomb, right? What the fuck? Right? Like, it just gets to this. There is an inadequacy at the core of all of these characters, right? Everyone is struggling to try to fill some fucking void, right? She's like, I just can't conceptualize the math when it gets far enough, right? Dennis Dunn's just trying to get laid all the time and tell jokes. Mustache is also trying to get laid. Or a lot of them are just getting laid, right? But there is this kind of issue with these high-achieving people realizing that they can never achieve enough. And what happens when you really fucking shove their face in it like a puppy who pissed on the floor? And I love the fact that it just refuses to answer and like tie the knots, right? Yeah. I think it would almost cheapen the movie if they did.
Well, I mean, what's the scariest thing? I mean, it's the unknown, right?
The unknown, dude.
it just like, it revels in it, and it doesn't, it's like, because the truth is, like, quantum mechanics, like what influenced this movie, it's still just theory.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like science only explains so much, and then at some point, like, the human brain has to wrap itself around with the unknown and try to explain.
That's why we make stories to explain away every fucking thing. Right?
I mean, there's like the idea that there's like this theory that time doesn't actually move linearly. We just conceive it that way because it's the only way our brains can deal with it.
Yeah.
And to think that like this conversation is happening like maybe at the same time as John Carpenter's making Prince of Darkness.
Yeah. Before he even makes it, there's two fucking guys ripping it up. Dude, who knows? But I remember I made a joke earlier. I used to get stoned and I was watching fucking Cosmos, right? And he talked about like the amount of numbers of how many fucking possible universes and planets there just are. And he was like, it's such a great number, right? I remember reading that somewhere, like even a trillion, $1 billion. Our brains can't comprehend what that number truly means. So we substitute something that means a lot to us, right? And so I was like getting stoned, just going down this fucking YouTube hole and watching Cosmos. And I think that's the scariest thing this movie really hammers on, is how nothing fucking matters at all. Right? Like even this, right? At the end of the movie, they're just like, they're still on the other side. But that just, I think the idea of gods, right, makes us feel so fucking small. And I think science does that too, right? It's just all these things that are somewhat reducing our role in our own lives. And I don't know, man. I fucking love the way he attacks this. It's not like a fucking samurai slice. It's more of like getting fucking beaten to death with a beer bottle. But in a beautiful way.
Yeah, he takes you over to the edge, but he doesn't. He then makes you, makes you think about, like, okay, like he can't spoon feed it to you. He doesn't have the answers. I mean,
I honestly wonder if he fucking had like a Bible, like this is what all of this means, or if he just said, it scares me. You know what I mean? That's what it really feels like.
Yeah.
Well, I can't imagine if he had made this in the studio system, they wouldn't force him to put a pen on all that.
Yeah, well, I mean, they never would have even greenlit the script. I mean, they would have been like, wait, how long's the title sequence?
Dude, that's like the new hip thing. I was watching Drive My Car last year for the Oscars. That fucking like the opening credit thing hits like 35 minutes into the movie. You're just like, oh wait, fuck, I forgot they even didn't do this yet.
He was ahead of his time.
Carpenter was a fucking trailblazer.
I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely, obviously not every movie works for me when they're slow. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
like I said, a movie either speaks to you on some level or it doesn't. But when a movie speaks to me, like pace has nothing to do with it. Like I can
Yeah.
revel in, a slow burn
Yeah.
forever. Like I could just sit there and watch this juxtaposition of what's going on at church and what's going on at the
Hell yeah.
university. Like he could have made that another 20 minutes and I would have been like, all
Yeah.
right, like I'm in it. The music is on, like I'm feeling
Yeah.
it. Like
Fuck
it's
yeah.
interesting. His choice of the way he cuts it is really odd but expert. Like look, and more than anything, John Carpenter, in my opinion, he's a craftsman. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
of any director of his generation, he was among the most polished. Like, especially if you look at the horror genre, and not to take anything away from Wes Craven, George Romero, Toby Hooper. I love all those directors, and I love all their the early movies. But if you just look at them compared to what John Carpenter was doing with Assault at Precinct 13 and then Halloween, like there's just a professional polish to his movies that, okay, we look at them now when they're dated because they were made, in the 70s and on a low budget. So there's just some things that are unavoidable. But at the end of the day, like the guy knows how to make a movie. And I don't think I mean, I don't know, but I wouldn't guess that he considers himself an artist. But I think he probably does consider himself.
I actually just heard a clip where he was mad that he went to one of the last Masters of Horror dinner he went to, right, when they'd all get together. He went and he goes, yeah, and my old pal David Cronenberg showed up. And I walked over and he was holding court and he goes, he thinks he's very important now. He thinks he's an artist. And he wouldn't even look at me, so I left. So I can assure you, John Carpenter, and this as he's like lighting another cigarette, I do not think John Carpenter holds a lot of pretension about who he was, which to your point is incredible because I Wes Craven and all them, I also love their shit, but he is such a better visual storyteller than his peers, I felt like.
Yeah. He just had a grasp on the nuts and bolts of how to make a movie. And I think that comes from like just a sheer love for the craftsmen of the studio system, like his love for Howard Hawks and John Ford and Alfred Hitchcock. Like Wes Craven hadn't even seen a movie till he was like 30 or something like that.
He was living horror movies, it sounded like, for his young life.
John Carpenter aspired to something.
Yeah.
Some of the greatest filmmakers of all time. And I think that propelled him to have like a certain bar that he tried to reach. And he's like, look, I want to shoot this shit in widescreen. Like I want it to be a Hollywood movie. Even if it's not a Hollywood movie, I want it to look like that.
Yeah.
And like in some ways, it's like his priorities were different. I mean, look, all of them made a horror movie because it was a way to make a movie. None of them were like, I want to be a horror movie director. But, like, I just want to make a movie that we can make money so that we can make another movie. And that's how all those, even Sam Raimi, they didn't want to make, he didn't want to make Evil Dead movies. He just was like, but John Carpenter, I think he, more than anyone, and I don't necessarily think of him that much as a horror director because he's done so much other stuff.
Yeah. Like
to me, he's just like, he's a filmmaker that has made really great horror movies.
Yeah.
But like,
some of the fucking best.
Yeah. But even
but he's
like
also made some of your favorites in other genres too.
Yeah, but like Starman is like maybe among my favorite movies of his.
So and that movie is so much more fucked up than I remembered. I just rewatched it this year for the first time in maybe like 25 years. And it did not, I thought it was just like sexual ET when I was a kid. I had forgotten how absolutely bizarre that like birthing scene is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's among the scariest things he's ever put on film, my friend. That still fucks me up. All right, well, while I still got you here, before we wrap up here, if you had to shotgun off the top of your head, top 5 Carpenter movies.
Yes.
I knew it was going to be hard.
Well, I would have to say The Thing.
Okay.
I would have to say In the Mouth of Madness just because of its impact on me.
Hell yeah.
Um, I do love Starman. I'd say Starman. Um, and then after that, it becomes really difficult for me. I've always appreciated like his action movies, but I've always been more partial to the horror movies. I do have a love for Christine, and I guess this one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go all except for Starman. I'm gonna go.
When I was younger,
I'm gonna
maybe
go with the
vampires
Apocalypse
snuck in.
trilogy.
Yeah, the Apocalypse trilogy. See, I think those. I know Halloween, Mouth of Madness, The Thing would all be in mine. And then I think weirdly I would add The Fog and Big Trouble Little China like number 2 or 3. But I think I'm with you. I really gravitate to his horror storytelling. And even Big Trouble Little China to me when I was a kid, it had those elements of horror that I loved. I think that's what I latched on to as much as kind of the neon karate stuff. You know, I love seeing like the Beholder in the dungeon. I love seeing the fucking, little hairy Yeti. There's just something very weird watching that at 5 years old, right? The blood magic and the fucking light in the face. I don't know what my dad was thinking, but I'm glad he fucking did it. Because that was my John Carpenter, like your Carpenter that, fucking set you on the path. So,
yeah.
Anything else about Prince of Darkness before we dip out of here?
I mean, I would just say that, I don't want to put crowbar it in, but I think on Saturday movie
That's
sleepover,
what we do here.
on Saturday movie sleepovers, one of the things that my co-host Dion and I try to always do is like we'll look at the movie within context. And I think, I mean, it's extremely overt in this, and maybe could have been handled with a little bit of a lighter touch. But I think it's important for people that are watching it now that weren't alive in 1987 to put into context that like the idea of like evil being ejaculated into people is a very much kind of like playing on people's fear of AIDS at the time, which was like terrifying. Like people were afraid to use like public toilets because they were afraid to get it. And all people like really knew at some point was that it was like fluids. And so, I mean, people look at the Thing in retrospect and say like that was also it because of the blood and all that stuff. But the Thing kind of comes out before the huge AIDS scare.
Well, I mean, just imagine waking up, there's a girl on your bed, she ejaculates into your mouth, and now, no, I mean, this is, because that was a strange time, because I was young enough, and here in Indiana, not more than maybe like 30 minutes from where I grew up was where the Ryan White story happened.
Yeah.
So there was a little boy in our town, or not in our town, but in our state, he got AIDS through a blood transfusion, and he went through like a fucking nightmare, obviously. But it was one of those things, all of our parents had to sit us down. And they're like, our teachers were like, can we fucking talk about this? What? So it was fucking terrifying. Because I was in maybe like 3rd grade. Not nearly old enough to even comprehend, what sex was. Or it was just like there's this thing coming to get you, right? It might as well have been a horror movie monster. So I do think it is kind of funny, right? Because like we lived through that. And you go back and watch now and you're like, how could people have been so panicked? And also, you're like, people's information sources were so much more limited back then.
Yeah.
So like if you didn't read the paper or catch the nightly news, that was just over. There wasn't 24-hour news on all the time. You know what I mean? So it's just a weirder, like low information time where like your information might just be your neighbor being like, well, this is how it is. I swear to God. And you're just like, well, why would he lie to me? He's my neighbor. Right? Like,
yeah.
So yeah, that's actually interesting. I never thought of this in the aid context, but once you say it, it does. Also, it kind of explains why all the characters are there's a lot of this like intermingling romance talk throughout about people hooking up and this and that.
Yeah. But also like, at that point it was by 87, like it was a lot of people thought that it was gay people. And you notice that in almost every case, like how it's transmitted is same sex, it's someone, and the one time that it's transmitted that it's not from like a woman to a woman is with the black character, and that's interracial. which in '87 was also still kind of taboo.
Yeah.
And the
And it's a
only
threesome because the other lady's like on the floor looking.
time where there is an exchange of fluids that's heterosexual is with Catherine and Mustache, which is the only heterosexual, and that is safe in the context of the movie.
And they're the heroes of the fucking movie.
And one
then
thing
there's
that
even if you're in the basement, the fucking thing can just drop in your mouth after you get your neck snapped. Okay, this is like, I might have to rewatch it right now because that just completely never like hit in my brain at all.
Well, think about this when you rewatch it. The character of
let me make a note of more scary things in Prince of Darkness. Yeah,
this isn't necessarily scary, but one thing I thought was interesting in researching it, that the character of Walter, the the young Asian guy, there is like this little of like. There's like this homosexual thing that's going on with him. He's like, when I was 12, I broke out because homosexual panic. Yep. When he says to Brian, the mustache guy, like, I'm supposed to go on this date with this beautiful trial attorney. He's like, oh, where are you taking him? And where does Walter get trapped at the end of the movie?
In a closet.
He's in the closet.
And the only time a woman touches him, she bites him and he screams.
And when he escapes, when he runs out of that closet, he's running from a fluid transfer from women. So, you think about that.
And throws her ass out the window. Damn, yeah. We need to get on an Xbox Live party with John Carpenter and ask these questions. I need to know. Just like, he's like, hey, man, you're really killing my Call of Duty score with all these fucking Prince of Darkness questions.
But Prince of Darkness, I think it's a to me, it stands apart in his catalog. Not necessarily because it's better than his other movies, but it's, as I get older and I see more movies, I come to appreciate the movies that I feel are like truly unique.
Yeah.
And even though this one does, show the influences of like what influenced him to make the movie, at the end of the day, like there's, as far as I've seen, there's no other movie that's quite like Prince of Darkness. And for that reason alone, I kind of appreciate it.
I mean, maybe on a fluid transfer level, it follows, but that's about it. No, dude, great pick, man. This was a wonderful talk. Would you like to tell everyone one more time where they can find your stuff? Tell them about the Kickstarter, all the good stuff.
Yeah. So again, my name's J. Blake Fichera. You can find my books, Scored to Death and Scored to Death 2, that are interviews with horror movie composers. They're available on Amazon, other book retailers, or you can order them from me directly at scoredtodeath.com. You can follow me on the socials at Scored to Death. We've been putting out a couple of new Saturday Night Movie Sleepover podcast episodes, and you can just kind of Google those. But most importantly, right now, in the context of October of 2022, I'm trying to raise money to turn my books into the definitive documentary, feature-length documentary about the craft of scoring horror movies, which is a subject that I'm very passionate about. And so if you happen to be listening to this in time, please take a look at Kickstarter or come visit me on social media or join the mailing list at scoredtodeath.com to find out about it. The one thing I will say to try to just plug it a little bit is that one of the tier rewards that I'm offering is...
You giving out tubes of ooze?
I wish. That's good. Maybe I'll add those.
Only one, and it's real expensive. No.
But I put together a Scored to Death compilation record album of covers of horror movie themes by a very eclectic and awesome group of composers. From Alan Howarth, who co-wrote the music for this, is doing something for it. Holly Amber Church, who's a great composer who I've interviewed, and she's going to be in the documentary, as well as Alan will be in the documentary. The band Voyager, the band Anima Morte is doing a track. Steve Moore from the band Zombie is doing a track for it. Richard Christie, who used to be the drummer for Death, who now has a band called Charred Walls of the Damned, he's doing a track. The Will and Brooke Blair, who are great composers. Wojciech Golchevsky, who's a great composer who has done some amazing horror movie scores. All these people are getting together to support the film and recording new material, covers of great horror movie themes for me to put on a limited edition vinyl and CD, so that help raise money for the movie. So,
dude, that's fucking rad.
Yeah. So the support and love from the music and film music community and fans of the book and lovers of film music has been kind of amazing, and hopefully we can put together a really great movie from that.
You will definitely get that movie done. We're passing the good antimatter your way. No, man, it's been wonderful to talk to you. This was a truly awesome time. I will let everyone know in the show details where to find your stuff. And more than anything, man, thanks for the time.
Oh, my pleasure. I will talk about John Carpenter movies anytime, anywhere.
Be careful. We still haven't done Starman. I'll hit you up. Bye.